They locked me in a nursing home, so I locked them out of my will. I never thought I'd be sitting here, recording this story on my phone at 3 a.m, but here I am. My name is Margaret, and I'm 78 years old. If you're listening to this, then my story made it out into the world, and maybe, just maybe, it'll prevent what happened to me from happening to someone else you love. 6 months ago, I was living in my own home, the same house where I raised 3 children, buried my husband of 47 years, and planned to spend my final days surrounded by memories and dignity. Today, I'm sitting in room 247 of Sunset Manor Nursing Home, and I'm about to tell you how my own children betrayed me in the most unthinkable way. But more importantly, I'm going to tell you how I got my revenge. You see, money changes people. I learned that the hard way when my husband Richard passed away 2 years ago and left me with more wealth than I ever imagined we'd accumulated. Richard had been smart with investments, and between his life insurance, our savings, and the value of our property, I suddenly found myself worth just over $2.3 million. Not billionaire money, but enough to make my children's eyes light up in ways that still make my stomach turn. My eldest, David, was the first to start circling like a vulture. He'd call every week, which was more than he'd called in the previous 5 years combined. "Mom, are you managing okay? Do you need help with your finances? Maybe I should take a look at your accounts, just to make sure everything's in order." His concern felt hollow, mechanical, like he was reading from a script someone had written for him. Then there was Jennifer, my middle child, who suddenly became very interested in my health. She'd drive down from Sacramento every other weekend with her husband Mark, and they'd spend the entire visit pointing out things that were wrong with my house, with my routine, with my independence. "Mom, these stairs are dangerous. What if you fall, and you're forgetting things more often? Remember last month when you couldn't find your keys for 20 minutes? The truth was, I had misplaced my keys once, for exactly 17 minutes, because I'd set them down in an unusual spot while bringing in groceries. I was sharp as a tack, sharper than both of them combined, but they were building a narrative. I could feel it happening, like watching storm clouds gather on the horizon. My youngest, Thomas, was the only one who seemed genuine at first. He'd visit without an agenda, help me with yard work, and we'd sit on the porch talking about his kids and his job at the fire department. I thought he was different. I thought he was the one child who loved me for me, not for what I might leave behind. God, how wrong I was. The first real warning sign came during Thanksgiving last year. All 3 of them were there with their families, and I overheard Jennifer whispering to David in the kitchen. "She's getting worse, Dave. Did you see how she put salt in the coffee instead of sugar? And she asked me twice if I wanted more turkey." I hadn't put salt in anything, and I'd asked about the turkey once, then offered dessert the second time. But I started paying closer attention to their conversations, and what I discovered made my blood run cold. They were documenting everything, building a case, preparing for something I couldn't quite grasp yet. The breaking point came in February. I was having what I thought was a normal day when David showed up unexpectedly with Jennifer and a woman I didn't recognize. The woman introduced herself as Dr. Susan Mills, a geriatric psychiatrist, and she wanted to ask me some questions. "This is just routine, Mom," David said, his voice dripping with false reassurance. "We're worried about you living alone, and Dr. Mills specializes in helping families make the best decisions for their elderly loved ones." The questions started innocently enough. What year was it? Who was the president? Could I count backward from 100 by sevens? But then they got more personal, more invasive. They asked about my daily routines, my social interactions, my ability to manage my finances. Every answer I gave seemed to be the wrong one in their eyes. "Mrs. Anderson," Dr. Mills said, scribbling notes on her clipboard, "your children are concerned that you might be experiencing some cognitive decline. They've provided me with several incidents that suggest you might benefit from a more structured living environment." Incidents? They had created a file of incidents. David pulled out a folder thick with papers, photographs, and what looked like a timeline. There were pictures of dishes in my sink from when I'd been fighting a stomach bug and hadn't felt like cleaning immediately. There were notes about phone conversations where they claimed I'd repeated myself or seemed confused. There was even a photograph of my medicine cabinet, taken without my permission, with a note claiming I was taking medications incorrectly. I felt the walls closing in around me, but I fought back. "This is ridiculous," I said, standing up from my chair with all the dignity I could muster. "I am perfectly capable of taking care of myself. I pay my bills on time, I drive safely, I cook my own meals, and I maintain my home. Whatever game you three are playing, I want no part of it." That's when Thomas finally spoke up. My baby boy, the one I thought was on my side. "Mom, we're not playing games. We love you, and we're scared. Last week when I called, you didn't remember our conversation from the day before. You've lost 15 pounds in the past 2 months. Your neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, called Jennifer because she was worried about you wandering around your yard at midnight in your nightgown." I had never wandered around at midnight in my nightgown. Mrs. Patterson, that gossipy old hen, had probably seen me checking my car in the driveway one evening when I thought I'd left the headlights on. I was fully dressed and perfectly lucid, but apparently that didn't matter anymore. Dr. Mills closed her folder and looked at me with what she probably thought was compassion. "Mrs. Anderson, based on what I've observed today and the information your children have provided, I believe you would benefit from a comprehensive evaluation. I'm recommending that you be admitted to a facility where we can properly assess your cognitive function and ensure your safety." "Absolutely not," I said. "This is my home, and I'm not going anywhere." That's when David dropped the bomb. "Mom, we've already spoken to an attorney. We have legal guardianship papers being processed. Dr. Mills's evaluation gives us the authority to make decisions about your care if you're unable to make sound decisions for yourself." The room started spinning. "Legal guardianship? You're trying to have me declared incompetent?" Jennifer was crying now, but they felt like crocodile tears. "We don't want to do this, Mom, but we can't stand by and watch you hurt yourself. What if you fall down those stairs? What if you forget to turn off the stove? What if you give your bank information to some scammer over the phone?" "I have never done any of those things," I shouted, but I could see it didn't matter. They had made up their minds, probably months ago. This whole charade was just them going through the motions, checking boxes so they could sleep at night while they stole my life away from me. The next few hours were a blur of phone calls, paperwork, and strangers in my house. A social worker arrived. An ambulance pulled into my driveway. Neighbors came out to stare as I was essentially kidnapped from my own home and transported to Sunset Manor for what they called a temporary evaluation period. Temporary. That was 4 months ago. Let me tell you something about nursing homes that they don't put in the brochures. The moment you walk through those doors, you stop being a person and become a patient. They take your clothes and give you institutional nightgowns. They take your independence and give you a schedule. They take your dignity and give you a plastic bracelet with your name and room number. My evaluation period somehow kept getting extended. First it was 2 weeks, then a month, then indefinitely while they monitored my adjustment and cognitive stability. My children visited regularly at first, probably to assuage their guilt, but their visits became less frequent as the weeks passed. David would stop by every other Sunday, staying exactly 30 minutes, asking about my progress like I was recovering from surgery instead of being held prisoner. Jennifer came by with photo albums once, trying to trigger memories to test my cognitive function. She'd point to pictures of family gatherings and ask me to identify people, dates, locations. When I answered correctly, which was always, she'd make notes in a little book. When I asked what she was writing, she'd say it was just to help the doctors track my improvement. Thomas was the worst because his visits felt the most genuine. He'd bring pictures of his kids, tell me about his work, ask about my day. But I could see the relief in his eyes when visiting hours ended and he could leave. He was relieved that someone else was handling the burden of caring for his mother. But here's the thing about being underestimated. It gives you power that nobody sees coming. While my children were busy congratulating themselves on solving the problem of their aging mother, I was quietly making my own plans. You see, being in a nursing home doesn't make you incompetent despite what they want you to believe. I still had my faculties, I still had my rights, and I definitely still had access to my attorneys. My lawyer, Patricia Williams, had been Richard's attorney and then mine for over 20 years. When I called her from the nursing home's phone, she was shocked to learn where I was and how I'd gotten there. "Margaret, I had no idea," she said. "Your children never contacted me about any guardianship proceedings. In fact, Legally, they can't just have you committed without due process. You have rights, and it sounds like those rights may have been violated. Patricia came to visit me 3 days later, disguised as a family friend, so my children wouldn't know she was there. What she told me changed everything. The guardianship papers David mentioned, they were never filed. The evaluation, Dr. Mills conducted, it's not legally binding without a court order. Margaret, you've been essentially kidnapped, and your children are counting on you not knowing your rights or not having the means to fight back. But I did have the means to fight back. I had my fortune, my attorney, and something my children had completely underestimated, my intelligence and my fury. Patricia and I began crafting a plan that would accomplish 2 goals: get me out of Sunset Manor and ensure that my children learned the true cost of their betrayal. First, we had to document everything. Patricia brought me a small recording device, and I began recording every interaction with the nursing home staff, every conversation with my children, every detail of my daily routine that proved I was mentally competent and being held against my will. The nursing home staff, bless their hearts, had no idea what was happening. They treated me like any other resident, which meant they were honest about my condition. Mrs. Anderson is one of our most independent residents, one nurse told Patricia during a casual conversation. She manages all her own personal care, participates in activities, helps other residents who are struggling with memory issues. Honestly, I've wondered why she's here at all. We also had me evaluated by an independent geriatric psychiatrist, Dr. Robert Chen, who Patricia brought in under the guise of a visiting specialist. Dr. Chen's evaluation was thorough, professional, and completely contradicted everything Dr. Mills had claimed. Mrs. Anderson shows no signs of cognitive decline, his report stated. Her memory is excellent, her reasoning skills are intact, and her ability to make informed decisions about her own care is unquestionable. I see no medical or psychological reason why she should be in a residential care facility against her will. While we were building my case for freedom, Patricia was also helping me restructure my will and estate planning. You see, my children had made a critical error in their calculations. They assumed that by controlling me, they were protecting their inheritance. They never considered that I might decide they didn't deserve an inheritance at all. I had Patricia draft a new will that removed David, Jennifer, and Thomas as beneficiaries entirely. Instead, my estate would be divided between several charities focused on elder rights and abuse prevention, with a substantial portion going to establish a legal fund to help other seniors who had been taken advantage of by their own families. But that wasn't enough. I wanted them to know exactly why they were being disinherited, and I wanted them to understand the full scope of what they had lost. Patricia helped me craft individual letters to each of my children, explaining my decision and detailing every lie they had told, every manipulation they had used, and every moment of trust they had broken. I wanted them to understand that their actions had consequences, and that stealing someone's freedom was the fastest way to lose their love forever. The letters were sealed and placed with my new will, to be delivered immediately upon my death. But I also wrote a 4th letter, one that would be delivered while I was still alive, once I was free from Sunset Manor. Getting out of the nursing home turned out to be surprisingly simple once we had the legal framework in place. Patricia filed a petition for my immediate release, along with Dr. Chen's evaluation and evidence of my unlawful detention. She also filed complaints against Dr. Mills for conducting an evaluation without proper authorization and against my children for elder abuse and false imprisonment. The nursing home, faced with potential liability, was eager to cooperate. Within a week, I was packing my few belongings and walking out of Sunset Manor a free woman. But I didn't go home. Not yet. Instead, Patricia had arranged for me to stay in a beautiful assisted living community about 50 miles away from my old neighborhood. Not because I needed assistance, but because I wanted time to execute the final phase of my plan without interference from my children. The assisted living community, Meadowbrook Estates, was nothing like Sunset Manor. It was designed for active seniors who wanted community and security without sacrificing independence. I had my own apartment, complete with a kitchen, living room, and all the privacy I wanted. I could come and go as I pleased, drive my own car, manage my own affairs, and live my life exactly as I chose. For 2 weeks, I let my children think I had simply vanished. They had no idea where I was, and the nursing home was legally prohibited from giving them any information about my whereabouts. I can only imagine the panic they must have felt, wondering if their meal ticket had disappeared forever. During those 2 weeks, I finalized all my legal arrangements, set up new bank accounts that my children couldn't access, and prepared for the confrontation that was coming. Finally, I had Patricia send the letter. The letter was simple and devastating. It informed my children that I was alive, safe, and living independently in a location they would never find. It explained that I was aware of their scheme to have me declared incompetent and steal my freedom. It detailed every lie they had told and every manipulation they had used. But most importantly, it informed them that as of that date, they were no longer my beneficiaries, and that they had forfeited any claim to my estate through their actions. The letter ended with an invitation. If they wanted to see me again, they would need to come to Patricia's office individually and explain their actions. They would need to apologize not just for what they had done, but for the years of lies and manipulation that had led up to it. And they would need to accept that their inheritance was gone forever, with no possibility of restoration. David was the first to respond. He called Patricia's office within hours of receiving the letter, demanding to know where I was and threatening legal action if his inheritance had been tampered with. Patricia calmly informed him that I was competent to make my own decisions about my estate, and that if he wanted to see me, he would need to schedule an appointment and follow my conditions. He showed up 3 days later, angry and defensive. I was waiting in Patricia's conference room when he arrived, and the look on his face when he saw me was something I'll never forget. It was a mixture of relief, anger, and fear, all rolled into one. "Mom, what the hell is going on?" he demanded. "You can't just disappear like that. We've been worried sick. Worried about me or worried about your inheritance?" I asked quietly. That stopped him cold. For a moment, the mask slipped, and I could see the calculation in his eyes as he tried to figure out how much I knew and how much damage control he needed to do. "I don't know what you think happened," he said, "but everything we did was because we love you and we were concerned about your safety." "David," I said, "I have recordings of conversations where you and your siblings discussed having me declared incompetent so you could access my accounts. I have documentation of lies you told to Dr. Mills. I have evidence that you photographed my home without permission to build a false case against me. Please don't insult my intelligence by pretending this was about love." He tried to argue, tried to justify, tried to minimize what they had done. But eventually, the truth came out. He was in debt, had made some bad investments, and needed money. He thought that by getting control of my finances, he could borrow what he needed and pay it back before I noticed. "The plan was never to hurt you," he said. "We just thought that if you were in a safe place, we could help manage your money and make sure you were taken care of. By stealing my freedom and lying to medical professionals? It wasn't stealing. You're our mother. We're supposed to take care of you." That's when I knew that David would never understand what he had done wrong. In his mind, my independence was something he could take away for my own good, and my money was something he was entitled to because of our relationship. I told him our relationship was over. I told him he was out of my will permanently. I told him that if he ever tried to contact me again or interfere in my life, I would pursue criminal charges for elder abuse and fraud. He left angry, probably expecting that I would eventually calm down and change my mind. He was wrong. Jennifer came next, and her approach was different. She brought tears, apologies, and a story about how she had been manipulated by David into going along with the plan. She claimed she had never wanted to hurt me, that she had only been trying to protect me from David's influence. It was a convincing performance, but I had heard her voice on my recordings. I had seen her taking notes during her visits to the nursing home. She had been an enthusiastic participant, not a reluctant victim. When I confronted her with the evidence, she broke down completely. The truth was that she and Mark were facing foreclosure on their house. They had refinanced several times, and their mortgage payments were more than they could handle. They had been counting on an inheritance to solve their financial problems. "Mom, I'm so sorry," she sobbed. "We were desperate. We thought that if we could just get control of your accounts temporarily, we could save our house and then pay everything back. We never meant for it to go this far. But it did go this far, Jennifer. You had me locked away from my home, my friends, my life. You lied to doctors, you invaded my privacy, and you treated me like I was already dead. How could you think that was acceptable? She couldn't answer, because there was no acceptable answer. Like David, she had convinced herself that her financial problems justified taking away my freedom. I told her the same thing I had told David. Our relationship was over, her inheritance was gone, and any further contact would result in legal action. Thomas was the last to come, and his meeting was the hardest, because I had loved him the most and trusted him the longest. He didn't try to deny what they had done or minimize his role. He sat across from me in that conference room and admitted everything. Mom, I'm ashamed of what we did. There's no excuse for it, and I don't expect you to forgive me. I got caught up in David's plan, and I convinced myself that it was for your own good. But I knew it was wrong. I knew it from the beginning, and I did it anyway. Why? I asked. You have a good job, a stable life. You weren't in financial trouble like your siblings. Why did you go along with this? He was quiet for a long time before he answered. Because I was tired, he said finally. I was tired of worrying about you living alone. I was tired of feeling responsible for your safety. I was tired of wondering if something would happen to you and it would be my fault for not doing more. So you decided to solve your tiredness by taking away my choice to live my own life? Yes, he said simply, and I hate myself for it. Thomas was the only one who seemed to truly understand the magnitude of what they had done. He didn't ask for forgiveness, didn't try to negotiate, didn't make excuses. He just apologized and accepted the consequences. I told him the same thing I had told his siblings about the inheritance and the end of our relationship. But with Thomas, I added something else. If you ever truly understand why what you did was wrong, I said, and if you ever find a way to make amends for the harm you caused, not just to me, but to other elderly people who might face the same situation, then maybe someday we can have a conversation. But until then, I need you to stay out of my life. He nodded and left without another word. That was 3 months ago, and I haven't heard from any of them since. People ask me if I'm lonely, living here at Meadowbrook without my family. The truth is, I'm less lonely now than I was when I was surrounded by people who saw me as a burden or a bank account instead of a person. I've made real friends here, people who value my company and my conversation. I volunteer at the local library, teaching computer skills to other seniors. I've joined a book club, started painting again, and I'm learning to play bridge. Last week, I got a letter from a woman named Sarah in Ohio. She had heard my story through Patricia, who has been using my case as an example in her work with elder rights advocacy. Sarah's children were trying to do the same thing to her that mine had done to me, and she wanted advice on how to fight back. I called her that same day, and we talked for 2 hours. By the end of our conversation, she had the name of an attorney in her area and a plan for protecting herself. 3 weeks later, she called to tell me she was free, and her children had been charged with attempted elder abuse. That's when I realized that sharing my story wasn't just about getting revenge on my children. It was about helping other people avoid the trap I had fallen into. So I've started speaking publicly about elder abuse and financial exploitation. I've testified before state legislators about the need for stronger protections for seniors. I've worked with attorneys and social workers to develop better screening processes for nursing home admissions. The money that would have gone to my children is now funding a foundation that provides legal assistance to elderly people who are being exploited by their families. We've helped over 50 families so far, and we're just getting started. My children thought they were stealing my money, but what they actually did was steal my illusions about family loyalty and unconditional love. In return, they gave me clarity about what really matters and the motivation to use my remaining years to make a difference. Do I miss them? Sometimes. I miss the children they used to be, before money and desperation turned them into strangers. I miss the family I thought we were, before I learned what they were really capable of. But I don't regret my choices. Every senior who calls me for advice, every family that avoids the trauma mine went through, every law that gets passed to protect vulnerable elderly people, that's the legacy I'm building now. My children wanted to control my story, to write the ending where I quietly faded away in a nursing home while they divided up my assets. Instead, I'm writing my own ending, one where I use my freedom and my resources to make sure other families don't go through what we did. They locked me away to get my money. In the end, I used that money to lock them out of my life forever. And I've never been happier. If you're listening to this and you recognize any part of my story in your own life, please don't wait like I did. Get help. Contact an elder rights attorney. Document everything. Don't let anyone, not even family, steal your freedom or your dignity. And if you're someone who's thinking about taking advantage of an elderly parent or relative, remember this. We're not as helpless as you think we are. We're not as naive as you hope we are, and we have more power than you realize. The money you think you're entitled to, we earned it, and we can decide what to do with it. The freedom you think you can take away, it's ours by right, and we'll fight for it. The love you think you can manipulate, once it's gone forever. My name is Margaret Anderson. I'm 78 years old, and I'm nobody's victim. Remember that.